The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV, series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Strange New Worlds episode, Elysian Fields. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, and welcome to the Elysian Kingdom episode.
Wait.
Elysian Fields or something else.
That's not the title, because that's what I saw listed. Interesting. All right. I will amend my my notes to reflect that. And then Father Cory Sticha, welcome.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. So, folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, on your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. Be sure to stick around to the end of the show because we have more of your fantastic listener feedback. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy called The Catholics of Oz. Wherever fine podcasts are found, you can find it, or at sqpn.com/Oz or OZ. All right. Yes. Now I see here where I mistyped Elysian Fields instead of Elysian Kingdom. So, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of the Elysian Kingdom?
You sure you don't want the Elysian Fields?
No, we'll talk about that in a second, where the title comes from, but Elysian Kingdom first.
This week, our Let's Meet the Crew of the Enterprise episode focuses on Dr. Mbenga. His daughter, Rukia, is out of the transporter and feeling perfectly healthy, despite the fact that she's also deathly ill. The ship has also come to a nebula that they've been studying, but when they try to leave, Dr. Mbenga finds himself embedded in a redressed version of the Enterprise, with all of the crew playing the roles of characters from the story he's been reading his daughter, except Hammer, who was protected from the effect by the fact he's a telepath. We get a fun storybook adventure, including a cowardly version of Captain Pike, and then everything turns serious when Dr. Mbenga finds his daughter in his quarters. The nebula is intelligent and has made Rukia perfectly well, but she can't leave or she'll get sick and die, so Dr. Mbenga allows her to live in the nebula. The ship goes back to normal, and the little girl becomes a special effect and goes zipping off into the nebula, only to return a moment later, years older, describing the great adventure she's been having with her new nebula buddy. In the end, nobody remembers what happened in the last 5 hours except for Dr. Mbenga, who reconciles himself to being parted from his daughter, knowing that she's okay. The end.
So one of the things that I thought of as I was watching this is, don't they have stasis tubes at this point in Star Trek? Like Discovery had stasis tubes, right?
Mm-hmm. I can't remember if Discovery did. Obviously, DS9 did, because it talked about having like a stasis area on the station and things like that.
Right, which is much later, 80 some odd years. But okay. So like just the idea of like having to use a transporter buffer as a way of storing somebody so they don't change. But where they had stasis, that was but that must have been later.
Yeah, I find so as long as we're at the higher conceptual level, this girl has no evidence that she's sick at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she never has. They had him talk about watching her waste away, but every single time she's out of the transporter, she is perfectly healthy and skipping around and talking like a spunky little girl. And this kid is not sick, not in any visible way.
Well, and then even says in this that, months have become days and days have become hours, like she's knocking on death's door despite his efforts to keep her in the transporter buffer.
Yeah, Star Trek diseases like progress very invisibly and can be cured at the very last second, apparently. Yeah, she doesn't look sick at all. And I think that's a flaw a little bit. I mean, if we're going to find a flaw, I think it's a flaw to not, because it doesn't create the pathos that's necessary to feel like the time's running out. We've got to find this cure, and to feel Dr. Mbenga's desperation to find this cure. She seems fine to me. Like it's kind of a weird choice that they made to not depict her getting sick.
And
Have
they
her
could have
cough.
done some, I was gonna say they could have done something as simple as all of a sudden as she's sitting there listening to the story, suddenly have a hard time breathing, or she gets out of the chair and kind of stumbles a little bit, or something. Doesn't have to be anything major, but just something to show this is not a totally healthy girl. This is not just a normal girl who gets stuck in the transporter buffer for 23 hours a day.
And while we're on the higher level of things, I find sort of a more general comment. All child actors are too precocious by the nature of them having to be actors, and they're thus having to be self-possessed and self-confident and stuff. They so often in so many different shows, small children seem too much, too self-possessed and too well-spoken for what a child of that age in those situations would be. It kind of struck me for some reason, especially in this one, seeing this little girl. She's great. She's fine. She's a good actress, but it's just, she's a child, and it doesn't always come across that way with these child actors. So I just thought it was interesting. So one thing is we're getting is, so we've seen this book that Dr. Mbenga is reading to her, and it's called The Kingdom of Elysia, actually, is the title on the book. And Jack Barazzini, who's the host of Secrets of Stargate and on some other shows on the StarQuest Network, picked up and shared this on our Discord community, that the book's author, I don't know if you guys caught this, is Benny Russell, who is the alternate character from Deep Space Nine when Sisko got caught up in the Prophet's like alternate vision of the 50s and 60s.
Far Beyond the Stars.
Far Beyond the Stars, yes. Which raises some very interesting questions.
I like the take that whoever modified the Memory Alpha wiki put, is that it says that this was an actual figure in the Star Trek universe back in the 50s, that wrote these books. And as part of that vision from the Prophets, Sisko saw himself in that role, in that position.
Right.
So, so that this wasn't just a fever dream that this person existed, but that they actually did exist back then.
Yeah.
And that also relates this story, because we've seen this plot before, essentially, where we have some alien force that's causing our regular characters to behave differently and act out other roles. And we've seen that in the original series. That happened in Cat's Paw and in The Squire of Gothos. It happened in The Next Generation, where Q forced everybody to play Robin Hood. And also Data got possessed by the alien culture computer thing that made him have Masaka and Corgano. And in DS9, we had Dramatis Personae and If Wishes Were Horses and Far Beyond the Stars. So we've seen this alien force makes our characters put on a play for us thing before. And I thought it was fine in those terms, Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was kind of fun to see our familiar characters acting differently, even though it's still the first season.
I loved the cowardly Captain Pike. That was great.
Yeah, Carly Captain Pike and the overly flighty, bubbly La'an.
Yes.
I know. La'an is like, she's the girliest girl princess ever, which is the polar opposite of what her character is normally.
What's so funny is she's got the dog, and according to Memory Alpha, the dog is literally Christina Chong's dog.
Actual dog, yes, it's her dog.
Was it Runa Ewok is the name of the dog?
Yeah. Although I saw references to it as cat, I'm like, not a cat.
It's very much a dog.
It's very much a dog. So yeah, and the captain's hair. Did you catch the hair being very different this time?
Oh, yes. Parted down the middle.
A lot of fun. And Uhura gets to be very different. And I like the fact that the Hemmer is the wizard Castor and Spock is Pollux, and they're opposites and light and dark, and which plays off of the character's own appearances.
It does kind of give away the he's your brother thing. If their names are Castor and Pollux, it's like, okay, they're the twins.
That's right.
Exactly. Now, there's some comments I saw online about, why does Hemmer resist and Spock doesn't? And,
Yeah.
they don't really explain other than that Hemmer was able to recognize it, the consciousness pressing on him, and was able to resist it, where Spock perhaps wasn't. Maybe Hemmer's mental abilities are stronger than Spock's, or at least as far as telepathy and things like that.
Yeah, it is a bit of a hole, though. I mean, we have long established in Star Trek lore that Spock is telepathic and susceptible to telepathic influences. So to not address it, at least in a line of dialogue at all, is kind of curious. So I mean, in another form of the script, you could have just had Spock being that character, like Spock picking that up. They obviously wanted Hemmer for some reason, but and Hemmer is back after being missing for a couple episodes, which is interesting to note too.
With the magic of science.
Yes, there was a couple of really good lines with that, where he get using the equipment aboard the ship to bring about actions that looked magical.
My favorite Hemmer line, though, was one where he is describing how it felt to come into mental contact with the nebula. And he says, it felt like my brain was being squeezed out through my nose. And at that point, Erica Ortega says, I did that to a man once.
Yes. So let's see. Uhura is Queen Nev, the chief enemy of M'Benga's in the story. Number one, Una, is the huntress figure, which makes sense. I thought for a second that she'd be the Queen Nev, that when they were referring to her, but
that's what I thought too. That's what I thought, and it was kind of fun to see Uhura as kind of playing the evil, maniacal queen.
Yeah, that because it's very different from her regular character. There is I have to kind of nitpick. So the doctor in the beginning is doing this, working on creating a medicine to heal his daughter on this lab table, and something goes wrong and it kind of explodes in his face. And then a force field pops up, and I'm like, in the 20th century, we have lab hoods where you don't stick your head in the space where the bad things could happen. Like, maybe you should go back to some of that technology. It seems like a bad idea.
And at first he thought that explosion caused him to hallucinate, and all this was a hallucination. But it turned out it was obviously something very different.
A nice misdirection. So let's talk a bit about the title of the book and episode, which refers to Elysia, and my mistake of the Elysian fields. Jimmy, what is the reference here? The Elysian reference.
The Elysian fields are in Greek mythology where good people go when they die. And not necessarily all good people, but certain good people go to the Elysian fields, and it's a paradisical type environment.
Okay. And so the reference, maybe a bit of a reference to the girl's, coming end of her life, her coming death, impending, and the fact that she ends up in an Elysian field, Elysian kingdom situation at the end, going off with this entity. Right. So, and she asked the question at the beginning, what if we could change the ending? And which is what this entity helps her do, in both literal and literary sense.
Mm-hmm.
So there's these two major parts. The first part is, really three if you want to count the prologue, but the two major parts of the story are everything that happens before M'Benga goes into his quarters, and everything that happens after M'Benga goes into his quarters. And the before segment is the fun, frolicky romp, where, it's clear the actors are having fun. They're playing against type. They're, it is genuinely fun. At one point, Spock is talking about how as a wizard, he's going to take them on a shortcut to get to, or he's going to get them safely into Queen Nev's kingdom. And they ask how he's going to do that. And he says that he's going to take them through the swamp of infinite deaths. Yes. And Pike's just very subtly says, "Oh, that's not a good swamp."
That was very good.
And so we have all this fun stuff, which is is inconsequential. You know, it's not really doing anything, but it's just a chance to have fun. And then suddenly the emotional tone of everything flips. When Mbenga goes into his quarters and Rukia is there and he's got Himmer with him, and Himmer starts allows the nebula to speak through him and so forth, and the whole emotional dynamic of everything changes.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel like the same story anymore. And Mbenga is making these decisions for his daughter, allowing her to stay and become permanently nebulized as far as he knows. And I'm going, wait, whoa. If I'm a father, these decisions are coming way too fast.
Right.
And
too easy.
Too easy.
Yeah.
This is heavy, dude. And then she turns into a special effect and she zooms out the window and comes back like a second later as an adult. And is talking about how this was the right decision and stuff. And I'm going, you are so lucky, because in real life, she wouldn't have come back the next second, and she would have spent years resenting you as her father who abandoned her to this hideous alien cloud thing.
Right.
I will say that the choice was foreshadowed when he was working on the experiments, and Una comes in because there was some shuttle crew that needed to be checked out, that cleared for duty, and he wasn't doing it. And she has to say, I sympathize with your responsibilities as a father to do this, but you also have responsibilities to the crew. You know, you have a job you need to do to the crew. And of course that plays out then with the conversation with the daughter of, he has a choice. It's either the crew stays trapped in the daughter's imagination, basically fantasy, or he has to let go of his daughter.
Because conveniently the nebula can cure her, the entity in the nebula can cure her, but she has to stay with the entity for the cure to remain in place.
Yeah, and this also undermines what they did a few weeks ago with that scientist from the evil hell world,
Majalis.
giving him information that should be able to help treat his daughter. We never saw anything come of that.
I assume that's what he was working on. You know, that he was using that information to what he was working on when it blew up in his face. But
it was weird that they brought it up in that episode as a potential cure, and it wasn't. It just seemed seems kind of odd to sort of bring that misdirection in, you know, the thread.
Well, he didn't give him the technology, just gave him the lead, basically, is the way they put it. You know, gave him some guidance of where to look, but didn't give him the actual technology to cure her.
Yeah. The life form itself, they talk about it's a spontaneously occurring
they say it's a Boltzmann brain, but yes, they say it's a Boltzmann brain, but it that's kind of iffy, but whatever. It's an intelligent nebula. That's all we need to know. They didn't need to layer on a Boltzmann brain.
What's a Boltzmann brain?
It's a hypothetical, it's a thought experiment basically in physics where and it gets used in kind of, so I'm trying to think of the simplest way to explain it. The idea of a Boltzmann brain does indeed involve a consciousness that spontaneously forms. And this gets used in thought experiments about the nature of reality. How do you know that you're not just a Boltzmann brain? How do you know that you're not just a consciousness that has spontaneously formed? And there's an argument that, well, wouldn't that be simpler to propose that you're just a Boltzmann brain than proposing that there's this whole vast universe? If you're just that's organized the way you perceive it is, it would be simpler to explain this small patch of space that has your consciousness that has temporarily formed in it. So yeah, there is a connection there in that Boltzmann brains spontaneously form, but they're playing it very differently than this is just all you need to do is say this is an intelligent nebula.
Right.
Yeah, the Boltzmann brain is more like the brain in the jar hooked up to a machine that's feeding you all your sensory inputs and all that, and you're not really a person walking around, that kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Hammer says it sounds like you're describing a Boltzmann brain, which they're not actually saying it is, but that technically, I guess. But he also says it sounds like you're describing a god, an intelligence with no body and the ability to create a new reality. Which
I thought that was Una that said it. Una in the Huntsman character said that sounds like a god. I
mistyped. Yeah, it sounds like a god, which gods don't spontaneously occur. Okay, but whatever. But I mean, I'll attribute it to the character of the book.
Yeah, and that's how I took it, and I understood God in this case as like a Greek god that's able, not as the true God, but as like a Greek god who's able to have an organic holodeck around them where they wish stuff into existence.
Right. And one of the clue that M'Benga gets for what's really going on here is that he realizes Adia, played by Ortegas, and the Huntress, played by Una, aren't supposed to know each other in the book, yet they do, obviously, in their story. And so it's because Rakia had imagined them as being together. And so that's when he realizes it's not M'Benga's brain that the entity's latched onto, but Rakia's, and how she's been beamed out somewhere into the ship, and that she is the MacGuffin, the Mercury Stone that Queen Nev wants. It's this all-powerful thing, and that's what leads him to her eventually somewhere on the ship.
Yeah, because he finds out she's not in the pattern buffer anymore. She was beamed out and is somewhere on the ship, but he doesn't know where.
Right. And I mean, we kind of talked about it, but I want to come back to it just as from my perspective. I wanted to talk a little bit about this decision that M'Benga makes. How do you do that? How do you just decide to leave her behind? Like, I get she's going to die, I guess, but she's not necessarily if you can get her back in the transporter.
Yeah, they haven't set it up properly, and they needed to show her if she's right on death's door, they need to show that.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And that would help sell the urgency of this decision. If he goes into his quarters and she's perfectly healthy, whereas we had seen her suffering and about to die and she had minutes left, then that could help motivate this, but it's not set up properly. And it feels like two just completely different stories. The emotional tone of before and after he goes into his quarters is so different that it feels disconnected. And so I enjoyed the episode overall because of the fun adventure, and I don't mind where they ended up with, okay, she's not on the ship anymore, but that last act was just really rushed.
Yeah. And part of it is because, literally the only reason why we know she was healed was because of the fact he pulls a tricorder and scans her and says, yep, she's healed now. I mean, don't see any sign of her again, talking about it earlier. She showed no symptoms of any kind of illness before. And now she's, just looks like a normal, healthy girl.
And I'm also left wondering, where's her mother? Like, did we get that her mother died? That he's a widower?
It's not stated, but we do know that the mom whose name was Deborah is no longer around anymore. Yeah, and the implication is that she's dead, it seems.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the way they played it. Not that this was like a divorce situation or they were separated because of Starfleet or whatever, but that it was, I think he says something like, well, that was your mom's name or something like that, where it's implying that she had died at some point.
Yeah, I think he says something like, you look just like she did, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, okay, that's right. So she goes away, comes back as an adult, and reassures him, and then goes away again, and then everything goes back to normal, and no one remembers. Even Hemmer. Does Hemmer not remember?
He doesn't remember because he
got possessed by the nebula.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because he said, how did I end up in the quarters? Last thing I remember, the ship was stopped in the nebula.
Right. So no one remembers anything that happened. Although I gather from from Mbenga's last conversation with number one that he wrote a report detailing what happened, which would be a very interesting report to read on how he described Captain Pike.
Yeah. All of them.
Yeah.
But he was the only one who remembered. He was the only one who remembered of the crew.
Captain, you were a coward. and a traitor. So, good. Any last thoughts on this one, Father Cory?
Speaking of names, of course, we found out that Deborah was his wife's name. His Mbenga's first name is Joseph.
Yep.
Right. We find out because Una calls him Joseph when she walks in.
Which I think was a TOS thing. I think actually he's called Joseph Mbenga in the original series.
That's I don't say I haven't seen that particular episode yet.
Yeah.
Didn't remember that.
Yeah.
And that's all I had. It was, we've got to mention too that Chapel was in this. She was Lady Eludra, the healer.
Right. That's right. The folk healer.
She really didn't play much of a role, but she was in there. So,
yep. Jimmy, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I if you want jokes, I could call for the jester, but I think I'll hold the jester.
That's right. Bring out the jester.
That does remind me. I love the bridge redressed as the throne room. Yeah, that was too cool.
Yes, very appropriate. And the computer being the oracle, I thought that was good too.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, I mentioned we have some feedback from our last episode, number 213, the Serene Squall. And our first feedback comes from Kelly on Facebook, who wrote, "This was a fun episode. I loved Pike's confidence that his plan to start a mutiny would work. As for Captain Angel, I found the character much more interesting and fun after the reveal. I loved it when Spock says that Vulcans are not swayed by emotional appeals, and Angel comes right back and says she was doing nothing but emotional appeals, and it worked against Spock. The "you fell for my sad story, that's on you" line was hilarious. I'm really liking Spock's fiancée. It's difficult to make supposed emotionless characters interesting, and the actress who plays her is doing a good job with that. However, I'm concerned that she's showing up in too many episodes. It could become tiresome if there are more episodes with Spock relationship drama. As for Captain Pike, if the fact that he's Starfleet's Boy Scout is in his file, I wonder if there's also a blurb about how he has the tallest hair in the fleet." I agree. I think I like T'Pring. I don't want her to become a regular part of the crew, so to speak.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play out. We've got a couple more episodes left of this season, and if they kind of play that out and then we don't see her again for season 2, or how that's going to work.
My sense is that she'll likely show up as a periodic, not as a regular character, but as a recurring character.
Right.
And, I don't know how many ideas they have for ways that they can, explore her relationship with Spock, but we've seen a couple of them here. And I wouldn't want her to vanish, but I wouldn't want her to become a regular either.
Right.
Kevin wrote on our Discord community, interesting. Jimmy in the episode on Serene Squall says Nurse Chapel says, "I know there are no feelings between us." And Jimmy says, "We know that's a lie." I interpreted that somewhat differently. Chapel obviously has feelings for Spock, but I saw her as specifically using the term between so as to speak the truth while not actually telling the truth. Between is reciprocal. She knows she has feelings for Spock, and he knows he has none for her, so there is nothing between them, just a one-directional emotional attachment. I agree that I like that they're deepening Amok Time and Spock and Chapel's relationship, but I don't like the way Vulcan sexuality is being handled. I like the idea of Vulcan sexuality being something very alien, constrained, and private, like it's portrayed in Amok Time, instead of the very modern human sexuality Spock and T'Pring are portrayed as having in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, so I don't think we're in disagreement. I recognize that Christine Chapel was deliberately using ambiguous language that can be understood more than one way. I also don't like the humanization of Vulcan sexuality. And I think it would be better if it was more, if they left it with the more alien understanding. That's much more interesting than, okay, so they're basically like humans, except every 7 years they're really passionate.
Yeah. It was better when it was like every 7 years, and we would look at it like, wow, that's so weird. I mean, it creates an alienness about the Vulcans, and Vulcans shouldn't just be emotionless humans with pointy ears. I think I agree with that.
I mean, the whole conversation with the novels at the beginning of Serene Squall was pretty humorous. That was kind of a funny scene, but beyond that, yeah, I kind of agree.
It's kind of fun watching Spock be awkward about things like that.
Yeah, about chokes on the wine.
Yes. Awesome. So I'm sorry I couldn't join you guys for that one. I was away on vacation, but you guys did a great job discussing it. So
yeah, we saw the pictures. No, I'm kidding.
So I think that does it for this time. We want to, before we go, take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Josette S., Mary H., Rachel H., Joseph G., and Michaela K. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at Star Trek, Star Quest. It's inevitable. I'm going to make those once in a while. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of the Elysian Kingdom, this Strange New Worlds episode? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/starquestmedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Strange New Worlds called All Those Who Wander. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, the swamp of infinite death is not a good swamp.